To be truly values-driven requires sacrifice, and that is not easy. This is Walking Your Talk, a podcast about leadership, authenticity, and courage. I'm Carolyn Taylor. Over my career, I've worked with well over 100,000 leaders in every kind of organization. People who are committed to closing the gap between their own values and those of their organization and how they show up every day. I wrote a book called Walking the Talk on how you change corporate culture, but this is much more personal. If you want to be known as someone who walks their talk, then this podcast is for you. This episode is the third in this series on what it takes to be led by values, to use values to make your decisions and to guide your behavior, which is so fundamental to being seen to be authentic and to be walking your talk. And that opportunity to demonstrate authenticity and to gain credibility and respect as a leader is never stronger than when you have a choice that is going to involve a sacrifice. If you want to credibly lead any change in your culture, then those choices and the sacrifices you make need to be highly visible to other people. It's been one of the shortcuts I've found, actually, in terms of what really accelerates credibility on culture, is what we're going to cover in this episode. So I want to talk today about the conflict that we all feel between our values and our needs. And what I mean by needs is our need to survive in some way, whether that's to survive socially, to survive financially, or to survive in terms of our status or our ego. So my need to be liked, for example, will sometimes have to be compromised if I'm going to live by my values. I might have to say something to somebody which they won't like. Or I might need to become unpopular or not to fit in with everyone else, to go against the crowd. And one of the difficulties actually in changing a culture is it requires some people to get it started to be willing to stand for values where the main culture doesn't really do that. So you are in fact becoming someone who doesn't fit in. And that will challenge your need to be liked if you have that as a strong need. My personal need to win might need to be sacrificed for the good of the team. It might be more important that a result is achieved, an outcome is achieved, even though I'm not seen as the center of that. That's quite a big ego need that I would have to give up. My need for money will often tempt me to do things that are not totally in line with my values. And at an organizational level, this is acute because an organization is being driven to perform every quarter for the analysts. So there are shortcuts that are made. There are products that are pushed. There are customers that are not quite serviced the best way that they could be in the name of having to deliver on the short term. And then again, on me personally, I value empowerment. But I tell you, when my kids were small, my need for control was really strong. When it came to tying shoelaces, do I just quickly get the shoelace tied? Or do I go, no, it's important that my children learn. I will take the time. I will let them tie their shoelaces at the time it takes for them. You know how that is. So there's a need for control. There's a desire for empowerment, a typical conflict. There's a need for security. So I stay with a company much longer than I really should, although I know deep down that I don't agree with its values. So what's the way through here? Because there's a moment when we all need to survive, and I want to be a realist here. Ultimately, we are not Joan of Arc. I am not going to die for my values. There is a moment when my needs really matter. And a company, is the company going to die for its values? Or is there a moment where it just has to go into survival mode in order to keep itself going? So this is a very profound and often, I think, not sufficiently talked about component of being values driven. That ultimately there is going to be times when there is a conflict between your survival and values. And what you've got to decide is which of those needs really, really matter And to what extent can you rise above them and allow yourself to become more values-driven? And that is the personal development journey along the values path. I think authenticity comes from pushing that conflict very hard, recognizing that it exists and holding it for as long as you possibly can by always asking the question, can I do both? Can we perform short-term and keep the customers truly happy? Can I allow the team to win and still get enough of my own satisfaction where I get to feel like I achieve? Can I find a new way of getting financial reward, even if it involves leaving the company that I feel is no longer living up to my values? So the question is the need really essential, or can I sacrifice that need? And people who are the most values-driven and seen to be the most values-driven, they do sacrifice. They hold out for longer. They don't allow needs to automatically dominate. And that is a default position. Needs will dominate unless you stand up for values in a very active way. I know a leader, a wonderfully customer-centric inspiration she is. I'll call her Sarah, although that's not her real name. And whenever financial numbers are presented, especially good ones, she asks, did any customers suffer for us to achieve these numbers? Do we have any products whose benefit to the customers are really marginal or actually damaging? And she encourages and rewards the people who find those marginal products, who find the services that are not really useful. And then they work together to substitute them. That's what I mean by being, in this case, a customer-centric, values-driven leader who is still driving for financial performance. And if Sarah was running a hotel, for example, she would very quickly have her people question the charges that hotels will sometimes make for internet use. It drives me insane that. It feels like completely not okay. And especially because some countries do it much more than others when I travel around. So I reckon that would be something that Sarah would uncover. Okay, where can we get new revenue from that is more value adding than charging our customers exorbitant fees for the internet? So short-term sacrifice for long-term values. And people trust values-driven organizations. So there are benefits. There's always benefits down the way. And I think we all know that there are benefits down the way. But the trick is, how do you move from where you are now to creating this new value-enhancing way of operating and still keep your monthly performance goals? How can you become more values-driven and still keep your financial goals? Those are the questions to be answering if you're really going to become one of these leaders. So the exercise for this week is a reflective one, and it's about your needs. What are your needs? Your financial needs, your psychological needs, like the need for security or the need for control, your social needs, like to be liked, whatever they are. What are the needs that you have that, if you look at yourself deeply, will sometimes cause you to sacrifice what you know underneath is what's right, to sacrifice the values that matter to you? And then ask, am I ready to rebalance? Am I ready to give up some of that need, or to find another way of fulfilling it so that I can strengthen the values that I believe in? And what would that actually look like? And what might be a small step in that direction? And then ask, am I ready to rebalance? Is there a new way that I can get that need filled? Or is that need not as strong as I thought it was when I think about all the benefits of fulfilling my values? That's the exercise. Next week, we're going to talk about what it takes to take a stand, to speak up, and to become an advocate for the values that you feel are important, whatever they are. Thank you for joining me, and you're one of an increasing number who are, which is delightful for me to see. Please encourage anyone else that you know to listen to this if it's giving you value, and I'll see you next week.